When my wife and I first drove through the gates of Pinewood Heights, we thought we had finally made it. After 15 years of saving every dollar we could, working overtime shifts, and putting off vacations, we were about to move into one of the nicest neighborhoods in our city. The houses were beautiful. The lawns looked like something out of a magazine. There was a community pool, a small park for kids, and security cameras at every entrance. This was the kind of place where nothing bad ever happened. At least that's what we believed. We had one daughter. Her name was Lily, and she was 16 years old at the time. She was a quiet kid, the type who preferred drawing in her sketchbook over going to parties. She had a small group of friends, got good grades, and never gave us any trouble. When we told her about the move, she wasn't thrilled about leaving her old school, but she handled it well. She always handled things well. That was just who she was. The first few months in Pinewood Heights were everything we hoped for. Our neighbors seemed friendly. People waved when you drove past. There was a real sense of community, or so it appeared. My wife joined a book club with some of the other women in the neighborhood. I started going to the Saturday morning basketball games at the community center. Lily got a part-time job as a lifeguard at the neighborhood pool, which made her happy because she loved swimming and it gave her some independence. But then we met Diane. Diane had been the president of the Homeowners Association for almost 7 years. She was the kind of woman who smiled at you while finding something wrong with everything you did. Within our first month, we received a letter in the mail about our trash cans. Apparently, we had left them visible from the street for 2 hours longer than allowed after garbage pickup. The letter was formal, almost threatening in tone, warning us about fines if it happened again. I laughed it off at first. My wife was annoyed, but said we should just follow the rules to avoid trouble. So we did. We made sure our trash cans were hidden. We kept our lawn perfectly trimmed. We followed every single guideline in the 40-page HOA handbook that had been waiting in our mailbox when we moved in, but it was never enough for Diane. She found issues with the color of our welcome mat. She complained that our car was parked 6 inches over some invisible line in our own driveway. She sent us a letter about holiday decorations being up 3 days past the approved window. Every interaction with her left a bad taste in my mouth. She acted like she owned the entire neighborhood, and honestly, in some ways, she did. The HOA board was filled with her friends, and they approved whatever she wanted. I started asking around about her. Turns out, we weren't the only ones who felt this way. Almost everyone had a Diane story. She had forced one family to repaint their entire house, because the shade of beige was slightly different from the approved colors. Another family got fined $500 because their dog barked. During a board meeting that was held at the community center next to their house, people were afraid of her and she seemed to enjoy that fear. But what really made me uncomfortable was her son. His name was Tyler. He was 20 years old. He still lived with Diane in her massive house at the end of the main street, the biggest house in the whole neighborhood. Tyler didn't work, didn't go to school, and seemed to spend most of his time driving around in a huge black truck that his mother had bought him. The truck was always parked crooked, taking up multiple spaces wherever he went. But of course, nobody ever sent him a letter about it. I heard stories about Tyler too. He had been kicked out of 2 different colleges, though nobody knew exactly why. There were whispers about incidents, about things that had been covered up and paid off. One neighbor told me that Tyler had gotten into a fight at a local bar and sent someone to the hospital. But no charges were ever filed. His mother had connections, and she used them. The first time I saw Tyler interact with my daughter, my stomach dropped. It was a Sunday afternoon, and I was washing my car in the driveway. Lily was walking back from the pool after her shift. She had her bag over her shoulder and her headphones in, just minding her own business. Tyler's truck came rolling down the street, way too fast for a residential area, and slowed down right next to her. He rolled down his window and said something to her. I couldn't hear what it was from where I was standing, but I saw Lily shake her head and keep walking. Tyler laughed and drove off. That night at dinner, I asked her about it. It was nothing, Dad, she said, not looking up from her plate. He just asked if I wanted a ride home, and you said no. Obviously. He's weird. All the girls at the pool think so. I wanted to push further, but my wife gave me a look that said to drop it. So I did, but I didn't forget it. Over the next few weeks, I started noticing things. Tyler always seemed to be around when Lily was coming or going. His truck would be parked near the pool when she was working. He showed up at the community center when she was there with friends. Maybe it was coincidence. Maybe I was being paranoid. But something about the way he looked at her made my skin crawl. I brought it up to my wife one night after Lily had gone to bed. "You're overreacting," she said. "He's just a bored kid with nothing better to do." If Lily was worried, she would tell us. Would she, though? You know how she is. She doesn't like to make a big deal out of things. What do you want to do? Go confront him. His mother runs this entire neighborhood. She would make our lives miserable. She had a point. Diane already seemed to have it out for us, and we hadn't even done anything. If I accused her precious son of being a creep, there was no telling what she would do. So I decided to keep quiet and just keep watching. But I did do one thing. I called my brother. My brother's name is Danny, and he was the one person in my life who always knew what to do. Growing up, he was the one who protected me from bullies, who helped me get my first job, who gave me advice when I didn't know how to handle things. He was 8 years older than me. I had looked up to him my whole life. Danny had been in law enforcement for over 20 years. He started as a patrol officer, worked his way up to detective, and for the past 6 years, he had been commanding the SWAT unit for our city. He was tough, smart, and didn't take nonsense from anyone. More importantly, he adored Lily. She was his only niece, and he would do anything for her. I told him about Tyler, about the way he seemed to follow Lily around, about the stories I had heard, about Diane and her power in the neighborhood. Danny listened without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. "You want my honest opinion?" He finally said, "Always. Trust your gut. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Keep your eyes open. Document everything. And if that kid so much as touches her, you call me immediately. Not the local cops. Me? You think it could be that serious?" I think guys like that don't stop on their own, and mothers like his make sure they never have to. I thanked him and hung up, hoping he was wrong. He wasn't. For the next couple of months, things were quiet. Tyler still drove around the neighborhood like he owned it, and Diane still sent us letters about every little thing. But nothing happened with Lily. She went to school, worked her shifts at the pool, and spent her free time drawing or hanging out with her friends. I started to think maybe I had overreacted. Maybe Tyler was just an awkward guy who didn't know how to talk to girls. Maybe my protective dad instincts had gotten the better of me. My wife certainly thought so. She kept telling me to relax, to stop watching Tyler's truck every time it passed our house, to stop asking Lily questions about her day that were really just me trying to find out if she had seen him. She said I was going to make Lily paranoid, and that wasn't fair to her, so I tried to let it go. I really did. October came, and with it the cooler weather that made everyone in the neighborhood spend more time outside. There were kids riding bikes, people walking their dogs, and families having barbecues in their backyards. Pinewood Heights actually felt like the community we had imagined when we first moved in. For a few weeks, I almost forgot about my worries. Lily was busier than usual that month. The pool was closing for the season at the end of October, so she was picking up extra shifts to make some money before winter. She also had midterms at school, so most nights she was either working or studying. We barely saw her except at dinner, and even then, she was usually tired and quiet. It was a Thursday when everything changed. I remember that because Thursdays were my late days at work. I didn't get home until almost 8, and by then my wife usually had dinner waiting. But when I walked through the door that night, the house was dark and silent. No smell of food, cooking, no sound of the TV, nothing. I called out for my wife. No answer. I checked my phone and saw 3 missed calls from her, plus a text message that made my heart stop. Hospital now. It's Lily. I don't remember the drive to the hospital. I don't remember parking or running inside or asking the nurse at the front desk where to go. The next thing I clearly remember is seeing my wife in the hallway outside the emergency room. Her face was pale, her eyes red from crying, and she was shaking so badly she could barely stand. What happened? I grabbed her shoulders. Where is she? What happened? My wife tried to speak, but couldn't get the words out. A doctor approached us and introduced himself. He was calm, professional, and that somehow made it worse. When doctors are that calm, it means they've had to deliver bad news before. He told us that Lily had been attacked. She had been found in the parking lot near the community pool by a neighbor who heard screaming. By the time help arrived, the attacker was gone and Lily was unconscious on the ground. She had a broken nose, fractured bone around her eye socket, bruises on her face, her arms, her ribs. She was in surgery right now to repair the damage near her eye and make sure there was no internal bleeding. I felt like the ground had disappeared beneath my feet. My daughter, my little girl. Someone had done this to her. Who? I asked, and my voice didn't even sound like mine. Who did this? The doctor said he didn't know. The police had been called and were investigating. The detective would want to speak with us soon. My wife finally found her voice. It was him, she whispered. It was Tyler. I turned to her. How do you know? It's the neighbor who found her. She saw his truck driving away. She told the paramedics. Something inside me went cold. It wasn't anger, not yet. It was something deeper, something darker. It was the feeling of knowing that I had seen this coming, that I had warned everyone, and nobody had listened. And now, my daughter was paying the price. I wanted to leave the hospital right then. Wanted to drive to Diane's house, drag Tyler out by his neck, and make him feel every ounce of pain he had caused my daughter. But my wife grabbed my arm and begged me to stay. Lily needed us here. She needed to see us when she woke up, so I stayed. I sat in that cold, sterile waiting room for 3 hours while my daughter was in surgery. I stared at the wall and thought about all the times I had seen Tyler watching her. All the times I had told myself I was overreacting. All the times I could have done something, anything. To prevent this, when the surgeon finally came out, he told us the surgery had gone well. Lily was stable. The damage to her eye socket had been repaired, and there was no sign of brain injury or internal bleeding. She was lucky, he said. If the attack had been any more severe, we might be having a very different conversation. Lucky. He called my daughter lucky. They let us see her around midnight. She was in a hospital bed, hooked up to machines, her face so swollen and bruised that I almost didn't recognize her. My wife broke down crying the moment she saw her. I just stood there, frozen, unable to process what I was looking at. Lily was awake, barely. Her eyes fluttered open when she heard us come in. She tried to say something, but her jaw was too swollen to move properly. Don't talk, baby, my wife said, rushing to her side. We're here. You're safe now. We're here. Walked over and took Lily's hand. It was so small in mine, just like when she was a little girl. I remembered holding that same hand when I walked her to her first day of kindergarten. When I taught her to ride a bike. We moved into this neighborhood and I promised her that everything was going to be better. I had failed her. I'm sorry, I said, and my voice cracked. I'm so sorry, sweetheart. Lily squeezed my hand weakly. A tear rolled down her bruised cheek. A police officer came by around 1 a.m. to take a statement. Lily was able to communicate a little by then, nodding or shaking her head to answer questions. Yes, she knew her attacker. Yes, it was Tyler, Diane's son. No, she had never done anything to provoke him. She had just finished her shift and was walking to her car when he appeared out of nowhere. He had been drinking. She could smell it on him. He started talking to her, asking why she never responded to his messages on social media. She told him she wasn't interested and tried to walk away. That's when he grabbed her. She fought back. She tried to scream. But he was bigger, stronger, and fueled by alcohol and rage. He hit her until she fell, and then he hit her some more. The only reason he stopped was because he heard someone coming. The officer wrote everything down and told us a detective would be in touch. He said they would be looking for Tyler and that we should let the police handle it. He said a lot of things that were supposed to be reassuring but weren't. After he left, I stepped outside the room. I needed air. I needed to think. I needed to do something before I exploded. I called my brother. Danny answered on the first ring, even though it was almost 2 a.m. That was just who he was. Always available, always ready. What's wrong? he asked immediately. He could hear it in my voice. I told him everything. About Lily. About Tyler. About the attack. About how she looked lying in that hospital bed with her face destroyed. Told him about the neighbor who saw Tyler's truck. About the police officer who said they would handle it. About how I was standing in a hospital hallway at 2 a.m. while the person who did this to my daughter was probably sleeping peacefully. In his bed. Danny didn't interrupt. He didn't tell me to calm down. He just listened. When I finished, there was silence on the line for a long moment. "I'm on my way," he finally said. "Danny, it's the middle of the night. I'm on my way," he repeated. "Don't do anything until I get there. Just don't talk to anyone else. Don't go anywhere. Just stay with Lily and wait for me." "What are you going to do?" "What I should have done the moment you first told me about that kid. I'm going to make sure he never hurts anyone again." He hung up before I could respond. I went back inside and sat with my wife and Lily. The room was quiet except for the beeping of the machines. My wife had fallen asleep in the chair next to Lily's bed, exhausted from crying. Lily was asleep too, her breathing steady but labored. I sat there in the darkness and watched my daughter sleep. I thought about all the plans we had for her. College, a career, a family of her own someday. Oh. I thought about how hard she had worked, how much she had overcome, how bright her future was supposed to be. And I thought about Tyler and his mother, and how they probably thought they were untouchable. They had no idea what was coming. Danny arrived at the hospital just after 5 a.m. He looked like he hadn't slept, but his eyes were sharp and focused. He hugged me without saying a word, then went into Lily's room to see her. He stood by her bed for a long time, just looking at her. I saw something in his expression that I had never seen before. It was more than anger. It was resolve. When he came back out, he pulled me aside. "Here's what's going to happen," he said quietly. "The local cops are going to drag their feet on this. I already made some calls. Tyler's family has connections here. His mother knows people on the city council, people at the police department. They're going to try to make this go away." "They can't," I said. "There's a witness. There's Lily's statement. They can't just, they can and they will, unless we stop them." Danny put his hand on my shoulder. "I'm not going to let that happen. I've already contacted the security company that handles the cameras at the pool. I have a friend who works there. We're going to get that footage before anyone else does." "What if it doesn't show anything?" "Those cameras cover the entire parking lot. If Tyler attacked her there, it's on video. Once we have that video, his mother can't make it disappear." I felt something I hadn't felt since I got the call from my wife, hope. "What do you need me to do?" I asked. "Right now? Nothing? Stay with your daughter? Be there when she wakes up. Let her know that she's safe and that the person who did this is going to pay for it." Danny's jaw tightened. "I'll handle the rest." I wanted to argue. I wanted to be part of whatever he was planning. But I knew he was right. Lily needed me here, not out chasing Tyler. So I nodded and went back to my daughter's room. Danny disappeared into the early morning light. And I knew that somewhere out there, Tyler's days of freedom were numbered. He just didn't know it yet. Lily came home from the hospital 4 days later. Swelling on her face had gone down a little, but she still looked like a different person. Her left eye was surrounded by deep purple and yellow bruises. There were stitches above her eyebrow where the skin had split open. She moved slowly, carefully, like every step hurt. We set her up in her room with everything she might need. Extra pillows, her favorite blankets, her sketchbook and pencils, even though she hadn't touched them since the attack. My wife took time off work to stay home with her. I wanted to do the same, but she told me we needed the income, especially with medical bills coming. So I went back to work, but my mind was never there. Every minute of every day, I was thinking about Lily and about Tyler. The police had been to our house twice since the attack. A detective named Rodriguez was handling the case. He seemed like a decent guy, but something about the way he talked made me uneasy. He kept saying things like, "We're looking into it, and these things take time," without ever giving us any real information. When I asked if they had arrested Tyler yet, he said they were still gathering evidence. Gathering evidence? I almost lost it. My daughter identified him. A witness saw his truck. "What more do you need?" Rodriguez stayed calm, which only made me angrier. He explained that Tyler was claiming he was somewhere else that night. His mother had provided an alibi, saying he was home with her watching a movie. Without physical evidence placing him at the scene, it became a matter of conflicting statements. So my daughter's word means nothing? That's not what I'm saying, sir. I'm saying we need to build a solid case. If we arrest him now and the case falls apart, he walks free and we can't charge him again. We have to do this right. I understood his logic, but it didn't make me feel any better. Tyler was out there, free, living his life like nothing happened, while my daughter couldn't even look at herself in the mirror. That's when Danny showed up with news. He had gotten the security footage from the pool. His contact at the security company had pulled it before anyone else could get to it. Danny didn't tell me exactly how he managed it, and I didn't ask. All I cared about was what was on that video. We watched it together in my living room after Lily and my wife had gone to bed. Danny had it on his laptop, and he warned me before pressing play that it was hard to watch. I told him I needed to see it. The footage was from a camera mounted on the side of the pool building, facing the parking lot. The quality wasn't perfect, but it was clear enough. I saw Lily walking out of the pool area, her bag over her shoulder, heading toward her car. She was alone. The parking lot was almost empty, except for a few cars and one large black truck parked crookedly near the exit. Tyler's truck. I watched as Tyler stepped out from behind a pillar near the entrance. He had been waiting for her. He walked toward her, and even from the camera angle, I could see the way he moved, aggressive, unsteady. He had definitely been drinking. Lily tried to walk around him. He blocked her path. She tried again. He grabbed her arm. What happened next took less than 2 minutes, but it felt like an eternity. I watched my daughter try to pull away. I watched her stumble. I watched Tyler raise his hand and bring it down. Again and again, I had to look away. I couldn't watch the whole thing. Danny paused the video. "That's enough," he said quietly. "You've seen what you needed to see." I was shaking. Tears were streaming down my face, and I didn't even try to wipe them away. I had known what happened to Lily. I had seen her injuries. But watching it on video, seeing the actual moment when someone chose to hurt my child, that was something else entirely. "This is evidence," Danny said. "This is undeniable. His mother can claim whatever she wants, but this video shows exactly what happened. Tyler waited for Lily. He attacked her without any provocation. There's no way to spin this. Then why haven't the police gotten this footage?" I asked. Danny's expression darkened. "That's the interesting part. When I contacted the security company, they told me someone had already called asking about the footage. Someone claiming to be from the HOA. They wanted to know if it could be deleted for privacy reasons." I felt sick. Diane. That's my guess. She's trying to cover this up. She probably thought she could get rid of the evidence before anyone else saw it. But my contact came through before that could happen. So what do we do now? Give this to the police? We will. But I want to do something else first. Danny leaned forward. I've been doing some digging into Tyler's past, and I found some things that are going to blow this case wide open. Over the next hour, Danny told me what he had discovered. Tyler had done this before. Not once, but at least twice that Danny could confirm. The first incident happened 3 years ago when Tyler was still in college. A young woman accused him of attacking her at a party. The case never went anywhere because she suddenly dropped the charges and moved to a different school. Danny had tracked her down, and after some convincing, she agreed to tell him what happened. Tyler's family had paid her off. Diane showed up at her apartment with a lawyer and a check for $50,000. The lawyer made it clear that if she didn't take the money and sign a confidentiality agreement, they would destroy her reputation. They would dig into her past, find anything embarrassing, and make sure everyone knew about it. They would drag her through the mud until nobody believed her story. The girl was 19 years old, scared and alone. She took the money. The second incident was more recent, just 1.5 years ago. Another young woman, another attack, another payoff. This time the amount was $75,000. This girl had also moved away, desperate to put the whole thing behind her. "How did you find them?" I asked Danny. "I know people who know people. When you work in law enforcement as long as I have, you build a network. Plus, Tyler isn't as careful as he thinks he is. He brags about things when he's drunk. Word gets around. I sat back, trying to process everything. 2 other girls. 2 other families who had gone through what we were going through now. 2 other victims who never got justice because Diane had the money and the connections to make it all disappear. Oh, she's going to try the same thing with us, I said. She's going to show up here with a check and a lawyer and try to buy our silence. But probably. The question is, what are you going to do when she does? I didn't even have to think about it. Tell her to go to hell. Danny smiled for the first time since Lily's attack. That's what I was hoping you'd say. The next few days were strange. On the surface, life in Pinewood Heights continued as normal. People walked their dogs. Kids played in the park. Diane even sent us another letter about our holiday decorations, as if nothing had happened. The nerve of that woman was beyond anything I could comprehend. But beneath the surface, things were changing. Danny was building a case that went far beyond what the local police were doing. He had contacted the 2 previous victims and convinced them to provide statements. He had gathered evidence of Tyler's pattern of behavior, and he had started looking into Diane herself, specifically her use of HOA funds. It turned out that Diane had been dipping into the community's money for years. Small amounts here and there, easily hidden in the complex financial records of the association. But over time, it added up. Danny found evidence that she had used HOA funds to pay for Tyler's legal expenses in the past. She had also used the money for personal vacations, home improvements, and even her car payments. The woman who sent violation letters to families over a misplaced trash can had been stealing from the community for almost a decade. Meanwhile, Lily was struggling. She barely left her room. She had nightmares almost every night, waking up screaming, drenched in sweat. She refused to talk about what happened, not to us, not to the therapist we hired, not to anyone. She just sat in her room, staring at the walls, disappearing into herself. My wife handled it better than I did. She was patient, gentle, always there when Lily needed her. I didn't know what to do. Every time I looked at my daughter, I saw her in that parking lot, helpless and afraid, and I felt like a failure all over again. One evening, about 2 weeks after the attack, there was a knock on our door. I opened it to find Diane standing on our porch, dressed in an expensive suit, her hair perfectly styled, a fake smile plastered on her face. Behind her was a man in a gray suit carrying a briefcase. Her lawyer, I assumed. "Good evening," Diane said, as if she were greeting us at a neighborhood barbecue. I was hoping we could have a conversation. "May we come in?" Every instinct in my body told me to slam the door in her face. But I remembered what Danny had said. Let them make their move, see what they're willing to offer. It gives us more information about how scared they really are. So I stepped aside and let them in. We sat in the living room. My wife joined us, her face expressionless, but her hands trembling slightly. Diane's lawyer opened his briefcase and pulled out a stack of papers. "Let me start by saying how sorry we are about what happened to your daughter," Diane began. Her voice was smooth, practiced. "It's a terrible situation, and we want to help make it right," my wife said. "Your son put our daughter in the hospital?" Diane's smile faltered for just a moment. There are different accounts of what happened that night. Tyler has his own version of events. But we're not here to argue about that. We're here to find a resolution that works for everyone. The lawyer slid a document across the coffee table toward us. "We're prepared to offer a settlement," he said. $150,000. In exchange for dropping any potential charges and signing a confidentiality agreement, this would also include an agreement not to pursue any civil action against my client or his family. I looked at the paper. $150,000. More money than I made in 3 years? Enough to pay off our mortgage, cover Lily's medical bills, and still have plenty left over. And all we had to do was let Tyler get away with it. I picked up the document, pretending to read it. Then I looked Diane straight in the eye. "You think you can buy your way out of this?" I said. "Just like you did with the others." The color drained from Diane's face. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Yes, you do." This isn't the first time Tyler has done something like this. And every time you've made it disappear with your money and your connections. But not this time. I stood up and walked to the front door, opening it wide. Get out of my house. And tell your son to enjoy his freedom while he still has it. Anne's mask finally cracked. For just a moment I saw the fear in her eyes. Then she composed herself, stood up, and walked toward the door with her lawyer trailing behind her. She paused at the threshold and turned back to me. "You're making a mistake," she said quietly. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." "Neither do you," I replied. I closed the door behind her and leaned against it, my heart pounding. My wife came over and took my hand. "Did we just do the right thing?" she asked. I thought about Lily upstairs in her room. I thought about the two other girls who had taken the money and spent years trying to forget. I thought about Danny and everything he was putting together. "Yeah," I said. "We did." The war had officially begun. After we turned down Diane's offer, things got ugly fast. It started small. A few days after that meeting, I found a notice on my car windshield. It was a parking violation from the HOA, claiming my car had been parked on the street overnight, which was against community rules. The thing is, my car had been in my driveway all night. I had witnesses. My neighbors had seen it. But the notice was there anyway, complete with a $50 fine. Then came the letters. We received 3 in 1 week. One said our lawn was not up to community standards. Another claimed we had unapproved paint on our shutters, the same paint that had been there since before we moved in. The third was about noise complaints, saying that multiple residents had reported loud disturbances coming from our house. We hadn't had any gatherings or parties. We had barely made any noise at all. My wife was furious. She wanted to go to the HOA board and fight every single violation, but I knew what Diane was doing. She was trying to bury us in paperwork, drain our time and energy, make our lives so miserable that we would eventually give up and take her money just to make it stop. I wasn't going to let that happen. Danny told us to document everything but not to engage. "Let her think her tactics are working," he said. "Let her get comfortable." Meanwhile, he was still building his case. And things were coming together faster than any of us expected. The 2 previous victims had agreed to provide official statements. Danny had connected them with an attorney who specialized in cases like this, and they were willing to testify if the case went to trial. Their stories matched a pattern. Tyler targeted young women, usually in isolated situations. He approached them with false charm at first, and when they rejected him, he became violent. Every single time, Diane had swooped in to clean up the mess. But that wasn't all Danny had found. Through his contacts in law enforcement, Danny had learned that Tyler was a person of interest in at least 2 other incidents that had never been formally investigated. One involved a waitress at a restaurant who had complained about harassment. The other was a report from a gym where Tyler had been accused of following a woman to her car. Neither case had gone anywhere because the complaints were withdrawn before any real investigation could happen. Diane's fingerprints were all over it. She knew people everywhere. The police chief of our town played golf with her husband. 2 members of the city council attended her church. The owner of the local newspaper was a personal friend. She had spent years building a network of connections, specifically designed to protect her family from consequences. But Danny had connections too, and his reached a lot further than hers. 3 weeks after the attack, something changed. Tyler came back. He had been gone since that night, supposedly visiting family in another state. That was always the story Diane told whenever anyone asked. But now he was back, driving around the neighborhood like nothing had happened, parking his truck at the community gym, even showing up at the coffee shop where Lily used to hang out with her friends. When I heard he was back, I wanted to confront him myself. It took everything I had not to drive over to Diane's house and drag him out into the street. But Danny talked me down. "That's exactly what they want," he said. "If you lay a hand on him, you become the criminal. They'll have you arrested." And suddenly the story isn't about what Tyler did to Lily. It's about the violent father who attacked a young man. Don't give them that ammunition, so I stayed away. But I watched. I watched Tyler strut around the neighborhood like he owned it. I watched him laugh with his friends at the gym, not a care in the world. I watched Diane host an HOA meeting where she talked about community safety improvements, without a hint of irony in her voice. These people really believed they were untouchable. They were wrong. About a week after Tyler returned, Danny came to our house with news. He had been working with the state attorney general's office. Apparently, they had been looking for a case to crack down on local corruption for months. Small-town officials protecting wealthy families, evidence disappearing, victims being silenced. It was a pattern they had seen across the state. They wanted to make an example. Our case was perfect. Danny had handed over everything. The security footage from the pool, the statements from the previous victims, the financial records showing Diane's misuse of HOA funds, evidence of witness tampering and obstruction of justice. It was all there, organized and documented, ready to be used. The Attorney General's office took it seriously. Very seriously. They assigned a team of investigators to the case, people who didn't play golf with Diane's husband or attend her church. People who couldn't be bought or intimidated. People who actually cared about justice. Meanwhile, Lily was slowly starting to come back to life. The nightmares were still there, but they were less frequent. She had started talking to her therapist, really talking, not just sitting in silence. She even came downstairs for dinner a few times instead of eating alone in her room. One evening, she asked me something that caught me off guard. "Dad, is Tyler going to go to jail?" I looked at my daughter, at the fading bruises on her face, at the fear that still lingered in her eyes. "Yes," I said. "He is." "How do you know?" "Because Uncle Danny is making sure of it. And because what Tyler did was wrong, and people who do wrong things have to face consequences." Lily was quiet for a moment. Then she nodded. "Good," she said softly. "I want him to know what it feels like to be trapped somewhere you can't escape." Those words broke my heart and gave me strength at the same time. The raid happened on a Tuesday morning. Just before 6 o'clock, Danny had warned us it was coming, but he couldn't tell us exactly when. He had recused himself from the operation because of his personal connection to the case. But his colleagues on the SWAT team, the team he had trained and led for 6 years, were the ones executing the warrant. I didn't see it happen, but neighbors told me about it later. Multiple police vehicles pulled up to Diane's house at dawn. Officers in tactical gear surrounded the property. They knocked on the door, announced themselves, and waited exactly the amount of time required by law before entering. Tyler was arrested in his bedroom, still in his pajamas, looking confused and scared. For the first time in his life, there was no one to protect him. No lawyer waiting with a check. No mother pulling strings behind the scenes. Just handcuffs in a police car and the beginning of the end. Diane was arrested separately about an hour later. She was charged with witness tampering, obstruction of justice, and misuse of nonprofit funds. The look on her face as they put her in the back of the police car was something I wish I could have seen in person. The woman who had terrorized this neighborhood for years, who had sent letters about paint colors and trash cans and holiday decorations, was finally being held accountable for something real. The news spread through Pinewood Heights like wildfire. By noon, everyone knew what had happened. People were standing in their driveways, talking to each other, sharing stories about their own experiences with Diane and Tyler. It turned out that almost everyone had a story. A violation that didn't make sense. A complaint that was ignored. A feeling that something wasn't right about that family. The security footage was released to the media that same day. I don't know who made that decision, but I suspect Danny had something to do with it. Every local news channel aired it, with Lily's face blurred to protect her identity. But there was no blurring Tyler. The whole city saw exactly what he had done. Watching the news that night, sitting next to my wife and Lily, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Relief. Not happiness, not celebration, but relief. The weight that had been pressing down on my chest since that horrible Thursday night finally started to lift. Lily watched the coverage in silence. When they showed footage of Tyler being led into the police station in handcuffs, she let out a long breath, like she had been holding it for years. "It's really happening," she said. "He's actually going to pay for what he did." "Yes, he is," my wife said, putting her arm around Lily. He's never going to hurt you or anyone else again. Danny came by later that evening. He looked tired but satisfied, like a man who had completed a long and difficult mission. We sat on the back porch, just the two of us, while my wife and Lily watched a movie inside. "Thank you," I said. It felt inadequate, those 2 words, for everything he had done. But I didn't know what else to say. Danny shook his head. "You don't have to thank me. That's my niece in there. There's nothing I wouldn't do for her. Still, without you, none of this would have happened. Tyler would still be free. Diane would still be running this neighborhood. Those other girls would never have gotten justice. Maybe someone else would have done what I did eventually. People like Tyler and Diane, they always think they're smarter than everyone else. But the truth has a way of coming out. All I did was speed up the process. We sat in silence for a while, looking up at the stars. The night was quiet and peaceful, the way nights in Pinewood Heights were supposed to be. What happens now?" I asked. "Now the lawyers take over. Tyler's going to be charged with aggravated assault, with the previous incidents used to establish a pattern of behavior. His bail is going to be set high, probably too high for even Diane to pay, especially with her own legal problems. She's going to have to choose between saving herself and saving her son. And you think she'll choose herself?" Danny smiled grimly. "I know she will. People like her always do." He was right. Within 48 hours, news broke that Diane had hired her own separate legal team. She was distancing herself from Tyler, claiming she had no knowledge of his violent behavior, and that she was a victim of his manipulation just like everyone else. It was pathetic. It was predictable, and it wasn't going to work. The Attorney General's office had too much evidence. The previous victims were ready to testify. The financial records were clear. Diane could spin whatever story she wanted, but the truth was already out there. For the first time since we moved to Pinewood Heights, I felt like we were finally safe, but the fight wasn't over yet. Tyler still had to go to trial. Diane still had to face her own charges. And Lily still had a long road ahead of her, healing from wounds that weren't visible anymore, but were still very real. This was just the beginning of the end. The months that followed were some of the longest of our lives. Waiting for justice, it turns out, is almost as hard as fighting for it. There were court dates and postponements, legal motions and counter-motions. Days when it felt like progress was being made, and days when it felt like we were back at square one. But through it all, we held on. We had come too far to give up now. Tyler's trial was set for March, almost 5 months after the attack. His lawyers tried everything they could to delay it, to suppress evidence, to discredit the witnesses. They filed motion after motion, each one more desperate than the last. At one point, they even tried to argue that the security footage had been tampered with, that it didn't show what everyone could clearly see it showed. The judge rejected that argument so fast it almost would have been funny if the situation wasn't so serious as the trial date approached. Something interesting happened. Tyler's lawyer came to us with a new offer. Not from Diane this time, but from Tyler himself. He wanted to plead guilty. The deal on the table was this. Tyler would plead guilty to aggravated assault and accept a sentence of 5 years in state prison. In exchange, the prosecution would drop some of the additional charges and recommend that he serve his time in a minimum security facility. It wasn't the maximum sentence he could have received, but it was real prison time, real consequences, real justice. The prosecutor met with us to discuss the offer. She was a tough woman named Patricia, assigned to the case by the Attorney General's office. She had been fighting for Lily from the beginning, and she wanted to make sure we were part of the decision. "I want to be honest with you," she said. "If we go to trial, there's a chance we could get a longer sentence. The evidence is strong. The previous victims are ready to testify, but trials are unpredictable. Juries can be swayed by good lawyers, and Tyler's family still has enough money for good lawyers. A guilty plea guarantees that he goes to prison. A trial is a gamble. We talked about it as a family. My wife, Lily, and me, sitting at the kitchen table like we had done so many times before. But this time discussing something none of us ever imagined we would have to discuss." Lily was quiet for a long time. Then she spoke. I don't want to testify, she said. I don't want to sit in a courtroom and look at him and tell everyone what he did to me. I've already lived through it once. I don't want to live through it again in front of strangers. My wife took her hand. Whatever you decide, we support you. This is your choice. Lily looked at me. Dad, what do you think? I thought about everything we had been through. The fear, the anger, the sleepless nights. I thought about watching my daughter in that hospital bed, broken and bruised. I thought about all the times I had imagined confronting Tyler, making him pay for what he did with my own hands. And I thought about what really mattered. 5 years in prison, I said slowly. That's 5 years where he can't hurt anyone else. 5 years where he wakes up every morning in a cell, knowing exactly why he's there. 5 years where everyone who looks him up will see that he's a convicted felon, an attacker, a criminal, that stays with him forever, no matter what happens after. I reached across the table and took Lily's other hand. But more importantly, this is your decision. Not mine, not your mother's, not the prosecutor's, yours. Whatever you need to heal. Whatever you need to move forward, that's what we do. Lily thought about it for another day. Then she made her choice. We accepted the plea deal. Tyler appeared in court on a cold Wednesday morning in February. He stood in front of the judge in a suit that probably cost more than my monthly salary, but it didn't matter anymore. No expensive clothes could hide what he was. When the judge asked him how he pleaded, Tyler's voice was barely audible. Guilty. Your Honor, those 2 words, after everything we had been through, felt like the most beautiful words I had ever heard. The judge sentenced him to 5 years in state prison. With no possibility of parole for at least 3 years, he was handcuffed right there in the courtroom and led away. As he walked past our row, he kept his eyes on the ground. He didn't look at Lily. He didn't look at any of us. He just shuffled along like the broken, pathetic person he truly was. Lily watched him go. Her face was calm, almost peaceful. When the courtroom doors closed behind him, she let out a breath and leaned into her mother. It's over, she whispered. It's finally over. But Tyler wasn't the only one facing consequences. Diane's case took longer to resolve. She fought the charges tooth and nail, hiring a team of expensive lawyers and using every trick in the book. She gave interviews to local media, painting herself as a victim of overzealous prosecutors and a family seeking revenge. She started a GoFundMe for her legal expenses. Though it was taken down after the 2 previous victims shared their stories publicly, for a while, it seemed like she might actually get away with it. Her lawyers were good, and they managed to get some of the charges reduced. The witness tampering charge was dropped due to lack of direct evidence. The obstruction of justice charge was downgraded, but the financial crimes stuck. The evidence was too clear. Bank records, receipts, HOA financial statements, all of it showed a pattern of theft and misuse that went back years. Diane had stolen from her own neighbors, the same people she had bullied and harassed and fined over the smallest infractions. In the end, she pleaded no contest to the financial charges. The judge sentenced her to 2 years of probation, 200 hours of community service, and full restitution to the HOA. She was also permanently banned from serving on any HOA board or nonprofit organization in the state. It wasn't prison, but it was something. Her reputation was destroyed. Her standing in the community was gone. The woman who had ruled Pinewood Heights with an iron fist was now the neighborhood's biggest disgrace. Within 2 months of her sentencing, Diane put her house up for sale. It sold quickly, probably because she priced it well below market value. She needed the money for legal fees and restitution. I heard she moved to another state, somewhere nobody knew her name or her history. I didn't care where she went as long as she was gone. Tyler's truck sat in her driveway until the day she left. I don't know what happened to it after that. I never saw it again, and that was fine with me. With Diane gone, Pinewood Heights started to change. A new HOA board was elected, made up of people who actually cared about the community instead of controlling it. The ridiculous rules were relaxed. The constant violation letters stopped. People started talking to each other again, not out of fear, but out of genuine need. It was like a cloud had been lifted from the entire Neighborhood. Lily's recovery took longer than any legal case. Trauma doesn't follow a court schedule. It doesn't end when the judge bangs the gavel. It stays with you, hiding in corners, waiting to jump out when you least expect it. There were good days and bad days. Some mornings, Lily would come downstairs smiling, ready to face the world. Other mornings, she couldn't get out of bed. The nightmares faded slowly, but they never completely disappeared. She still flinched sometimes when someone approached her too quickly. She still avoided the parking lot at the pool, even though she eventually went back to work there. But she kept moving forward. That was the important thing. She didn't let what happened define her. She didn't let Tyler take anything more from her than he already had. She finished her junior year with good grades. She applied to colleges and got accepted to several, including her first choice. She started talking about maybe studying criminal justice or psychology, something where she could help other people who had been through what she experienced. On the day of her high school graduation, almost 2 years after the attack, I watched my daughter walk across that stage to receive her diploma. She was wearing a blue gown and a big smile, and when they called her name, she looked out at the audience and found us immediately. My wife was crying. I was too, though I tried to hide it. After the ceremony, we had a party in our backyard. Family, friends, neighbors, everyone who had supported us through the darkest time of our lives. Danny was there, of course. Standing by the grill and pretending he knew how to cook burgers. At some point during the party, I found myself alone with Lily on the back porch. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. She was looking out at the yard, watching her friends and family laugh and celebrate. "Thank you, Dad," she said quietly. "For what?" "For believing me, for fighting for me, for not giving up even when it would have been easier to take the money and move on." I put my arm around her. "That was never an option. Not for 1 second. That's why I'm thanking you." She leaned her head against my shoulder. "Some people don't have that. Some people have to fight alone. I never had to. I always knew you and Mom and Uncle Danny were in my corner. I didn't know what to say. So I just held her later that night after the party was over and the guests had gone home. Danny found me sitting on the front porch. He sat down next to me with 2 beers and handed me one. "You know what made the difference in this whole thing?" he asked. I shook my head. "You didn't let them intimidate you." Most people, when they're faced with someone like Diane, they fold. They take the money, sign the papers, and try to forget. It's not because they're weak. It's because fighting is hard. It's exhausting. It costs you things you can never get back. He took a sip of his beer. "But you fought anyway. And because you fought, those other girls got justice too. Because you fought, Diane's victims got their money back. Because you fought, this whole neighborhood is a better place. That matters. That matters more than you know." I thought about his words for a long time after he left that night. Looking back now, I realize he was right. Fighting for justice isn't just about winning or losing. It's about standing up for what's right, even when it's hard. It's about showing the people you love that they're worth protecting. It's about sending a message to people like Tyler and Diane that they can't just buy their way out of consequences forever. Some battles are worth fighting. Not because they're easy, but because they're necessary. Lily went off to college that fall. She's doing well, making friends, studying hard, building a life for herself that no one can take away from her. She still calls us every Sunday, still comes home for holidays, still lights up the room whenever she walks in. She's not the same girl she was before the attack. She's stronger, more resilient, more aware of the darkness in the world, but also more determined to be a light in it. As for me, I learned something through all of this. I learned that protecting your family isn't just about keeping them safe from harm. It's about being there when harm finds them anyway. It's about standing beside them when they're broken and helping them put the pieces back together. It's about showing them that no matter what happens, they're never alone. And if I had to do it all over again, I wouldn't change a thing.